West Ham United, a massive club that was home to legends like Bobby Moore and Jeff Hurst, and yet a club that has failed to ever really win any major silverware. In fact, if you have a look at the competition page on FM22, as far as I can see, the last bit of silverware they won was in 1981, and that was the Sky Bet Championship. The only other major honour they've ever really held is the FA Cup in 1980. And more importantly, they have never won the Premier League, with their best finish being third place in 1986. In today's video, we're here to change that. Because what we want to do in this video is to build a club that is capable of challenging for the top 4 spots and eventually winning that elusive Premier League title. Now, admittedly, when you do have a look at the squad at West Ham United, that might take a little bit of time. They, of course, have got their talisman, Declan Rice, who plays in FM22 either as a central midfielder or as a defensive midfielder and does either of those arguably equally well. He can play as a ball-winning midfielder. He can play as a box-to-box midfielder. He's very, very versatile, and it's going to be all important in this team. Unfortunately, Kurt Zouma is here as well, and given he's the second best player at the club, there's probably not a lot we can do about that for a while. Thomas Souček, of course, their main central midfielder. I think I'm going to be playing him as a ball-winning midfielder, but when you start going down from there, does get worse very, very quickly. One of my main concerns as well is having a look at the goalkeepers. If I have a look at Areola, for example, and his report, it's showing him up as a good championship player. Their other main goalkeeper is Fabianski, who is showing us a Premier League player, but it's also 37 years old. So we're going to want to make improvements to all of that as quickly as possible. And as we can see, we have £9 million to do that and a spare wage budget of about £115,000 a week. I'm a little bit worried about our scouts when they're telling me to sign Anthony. Don't think he's ready to move clubs yet. This is what the best 11 kind of looks like at the start of the game. We're going to go away and see if we can improve that. So it's the 2nd of September, the transfer deadline is done, and we're going to have a quick look at what we've done at West Ham. We have had some transfers out, of course, the first of which is Vladimir Koufal, who has gone over to Rennes in France, netting us at 10.25 million, and realistically it didn't look like he was going to be a player that was going to be a major part of the squad, especially with one of the transfers we've bought in. If we have a look at his ability here, it's only 2.5 stars, and the case was much the same for Agued. I think that's how you say his name. Again, I'm really not good at pronouncing players' names. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but he's gone over to France as well, over to Lille for 4.7 million, and once again, looking at his current ability, probably wasn't going to make a big contribution this season. And the final major transfer out is Darren Randolph. He's gone over to Shakhtar. We only got a little bit of money for him, 2.5 million, but again, he was going to be our backup goalkeeper, so there wasn't a lot of point keeping him on the payroll, and it has allowed us to bring 4 players in, the first of which is Alban Lafont, who I've used I think once in a rebuild, and he is a really, really good goalkeeper. He has a lot of potential as well. He was playing for Nantes over in France. Having spent a season on loan there, they bought him for 6.5 million. We've paid 11.75 to bring him here. As we can see so far, starting off in the Premier League, 4 appearances, 5 conceded and 2 clean sheets, so he's not doing all that badly. We've then brought in on a free transfer Santiago Arias, who previously played at Bayer Leverkusen on loan and Atletico Madrid. He hasn't cost us any money, of course, because he was a free agent, so quite nice to bring him in without us costing any transfer fee. We've then brought in Ruben Vezo, who was at Levante. He's cost us £11 million, just because I felt we needed a little bit more depth in that centre-back position. He's a perfectly capable centre-back, as we can see up here. I don't think he's going to be here forever. I don't think he'll be in next season, for example, but for this season he's going to do. And then last but not least, we have brought in Reece Nelson. He has got some really good potential as well. He was on the transfer list at Arsenal for 5.5 million. So we've brought him into the club. He does a couple of things. Hopefully he develops into a good player for the future, and equally obviously he helps us fill our homegrown contingent that we do need at the club. After all that, we do have £10 million still left in the bank, not a lot left in the wages, so we could bring in some players should we need to in the future. For this season, we're asking the assistant manager to always play Lafont in goal when he is available, and Emerson over on the left, which might seem like a little bit of a weird one, but he's a good attacking left winger over Aaron Cresswell, who is obviously 32 years old. Maybe can't quite get up and down that left hand side as much as he could. I mean, I could have an argument for either of them, to be honest. Cresswell has got better crossing, so maybe actually, as I'm saying this, we remove Emerson and we just play Lafont there, just because although he's not the best goalkeeper at the club right now, he has the potential to be the best goalkeeper at the club, and I kind of want to capitalise on that. This is our season so far. We absolutely dominated in pre-season. We didn't play any massive teams though, to be fair. Nice probably the biggest fixture in there, but you can see giant Brillers, who I don't even know what nationality team they are, but we beat them 18-0. Looking at the league though, we beat Aston Villa 2-0 on the opening day with 2 goals from Scamacca. Manchester United we did lose. We then beat Wolves 2-0, and then we've just drawn with Leicester with another goal from Scamacca, who started off quite well in the league, 4 appearances and 4 goals, which will do us this season. For now though, we're going to need to simulate through the rest of the season and see how we do in season 1 with West Ham. But before we do that, a note from future James. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not long now before the release of FM23, and if you want to grab yourself a copy at a discounted price, then head down to the description now, where you can find my referral link, which will take you over to the 2Game website. You download their Steam link, you can get that instantly, the same as if you buy it on Steam. It also gives you access to the beta 2 weeks before release, and if you use the code EDWORTHY at checkout, you'll A, support the channel, and B, you get an additional 5% off. It is a win-win for everyone. So season 1 with West Ham is over, and we did end up spending that money. Bringing in this man, Ruben Neves. He cost us £22.5 million to bring to the club, which I think is a relatively good deal when you consider how good a player he is in Football Manager. Look at that passing attribute. His free kick taking is fantastic as well. He could be a real asset for the team, especially as he can play as a defensive midfielder, and that would allow us to put Declan Rice and Souček in midfield. And yet if we look down here, we can see that our system manager only played him in 2 games this season, and none of those were in the leagues, which in my mind is just outstanding how we're not finding a place in the team for this guy. So I think we're going to have to change our formation and our tactic very slightly next season in order to make sure that he's fitted into the team. But that aside, how did we do in our competitions this season? Well, let's start with the cups first of all, and the FA Cup, we had Lincoln in the 3rd round. We managed to beat them at 1-0, but then we lost 4-1 to Sheffield Wednesday. Like, how are we losing 4-1 to Sheffield Wednesday? Really, I don't entirely understand how that has happened. Especially look at that as well. We're on top in everything. XG, shots, alright, possession. We gave up a bit of possession. But how are we conceding 4 goals with this team? And Lafont has a 7.0 rating as well, meaning that we must have just been atrocious for our goalkeeper to have that rating and yet still have lost 4-1. Never mind. In the Carabao Cup, it's not a lot better. We've beaten Portsmouth 4-0 in the 2nd round, but then we've been dumped out of the cup in the 3rd round, losing 1-0 to Leeds. Which means the only thing really left for us to play for is the Premier League. And looking at the results, it looks like we've done reasonably well. We saw these ones, but then we didn't lose any matches in September. We've got a loss in October, 3-0 against Arsenal there. But we followed that up and bounced back straight away with a 5-1 win against Southampton, which is great. We've definitely come into a poor patch of form here. Obviously, the 1 loss in December, then they go to the World Cup that's happening obviously November, December time, so we don't actually come back until Boxing Day. January is disgusting. I mean, a 2-1 loss to Liverpool, a 4-1 loss to Manchester City, 2-0 to Brentford, and 1-0 to Everton as well. But we have picked up some steam here in February of wins against Crystal Palace, and we beat Manchester City 3-0 as well, facing them in very, very quick succession. March looks really, really good. April looks really good as well. A 5-4 win against Chelsea. That must have been a nice derby there for the neutrals at least. But then we've lost 2-1 to Leicester and 1-0 to Wolves in the last month of the season. We're following that up with a 4-0 win against Brighton, and then a 0-0 draw against Fulham on the last day of the season, where Souček got sent off in the 66th minute. If we have a look at the league table though, that does mean we've qualified for the Champions League next season. 68 points on the board. We creep into that 4th place on goal difference. Newcastle just below us on 68 points, and Chelsea in 6th place on 66 points. Those top 6 running away from the likes of Leicester in 7th, but we're a long, long way behind Manchester United in 3rd with 78 points. If we have a look at how the players did this season, unsurprisingly, given how he started the season, Scamacca finishes on 30 goals for the season, 26 of those in the league, a really good rating as well. I can see he's wanted by Milan at the moment. Second top goal scorer is Jared Bowen with 14 and 14 assists to his name as well, which is really good. He's wanted by Arsenal. In terms of assists, Jared Bowen does head up those charts with those 14 I just mentioned, and Aaron Cresswell has got 13 assists, so probably a good choice to put him in the team, or at least remove Emerson from the team so he could play. Behind that, there's not a huge amount in assists. Vlasic, who we actually recalled from loan, he was meant to be on loan at Torino. We recalled him because I just felt like he was one of the better players in the squad, to be honest. So he came back, 7 assists from him, and it kind of goes down from there in terms of average rating. Cresswell gets the best one, followed by Zuma, Dawson, and Scamacca. Alban Lafont, who we obviously forced to be in goal for the whole season, played all 38 games in the league. He conceded 45 and got 12 clean sheets. I'm not sure, if we have a look at the player stats, if that puts any of our players anywhere near the top of anything. Scamacca is the 3rd highest scorer behind Mohamed Salah and Erling Haaland, which is quite nice. Aaron Cresswell and Jared Bowen quite high up the assist charts as well. Aaron Cresswell actually getting the most player of the matches in terms of fewest conceded. Livakovic obviously at Newcastle here, he's only conceded 14 this season, although he's only made 14 appearances, so that's not quite as rosy as it looks. No Alban Lafont in there. He is in there for clean sheets. Now, for the season ahead, that gives us a transfer budget of £57 million. But we have got some players leaving the club. If we go over to the outs page here, Fabianski is leaving for Milan. All these players were offered new deals. Lots of them have chosen not to take them. But Fabianski, at the age of 38, probably time for him to go anyway, especially now we've got Alban Lafont in. Ogbonna is leaving as well. Where is he going? Sassuolo. We've then got Longjello is going, as well as is Aaron Cresswell, which is a bit of a loss. He is aging a little bit, but he wouldn't re-sign a new contract. He's heading over to Villarreal, and we can see as well we have got bids down here for Lanzini. So we are going to need to add some more players to the squad. Squad depth-wise, I think we're doing okay. We'll just drop this to 3 again. That means we've got Scamacca and Bowen who can play up front. Maybe we need someone there because I don't expect Bowen to play there particularly. We've got 4 players over on the left and on the right. We're very decent in the centre of the park and defensive midfield. So I guess our main weaknesses at the moment are possibly over at left back. We could do with some improvement. And the striker, if we could add someone into either left or right midfield, I would be happy with that, given that we've got Vlasic on both sides, Bowen on both sides, Ben Rama on this side. Cornet is on both sides, and realistically he seems to have been playing as a left back recently. And then we've got Lucas Paqueta, but he's been playing in the central midfield. So realistically, This transfer window, I think we need a striker. I think we possibly need a left or right winger and a left back. So let's go and do that. It's been a big summer here at West Ham. We have had lots of players in and lots of transfers out. We're going to have a quick look through the transfers out first, starting with the most important ones, basically. The first one to leave, Santiago Arias, who obviously joined us on a free last season. He did his job. He came in and obviously lasted the season, helped us out, but he's left and gone to Frankfurt for 2.9 million. The next player to go, now we've got a bit of money to spend, was Antonio. Obviously, he played a few games last season, but only 1 goal from 21 appearances in the league. Not exactly what you want from a striker. He's headed over to Valencia for 4.4 million. He served the club well. He's done his bit. It was time for him to move on. Much the same with Masuaku. He obviously wasn't at the club last season. He was out on loan at Besiktas. He has been for the past 2 seasons, question mark. I think that might be a database error. But he's gone over to Werder for 4.5 million. Wasn't a player we massively needed. Manuel Lanzini has left the club as well to join Racing Club in Argentina for 5.5 million. Only played 6 games for the club last season. Another one leaving, who genuinely I don't think played that many games, 16 last season, is Kira. He's gone over, as you've just seen, to Hamburger for 12.25 million, which maybe was a bit less than we would have liked to have sold him for. But again, it all adds into our budget so we can go and buy some more players. The other one leaving the club, Said Benrahma, he's headed over to Everton for £14 million. He did play a number of games last season, but I think we've got better players, both on the left and the right-hand side now. Pablo Fornals, much the same thing. Obviously over on that left, but he wasn't really getting into the team very much. He played quite a lot of games last season, but a lot of them were off the bench. We've managed to get £14.75 million for him. Maxwell Cornet followed him out the club. He's gone over to Vigo in Spain for 18.75 million. I think it's quite a good fee. And then Lucas Paqueta, not necessarily one we wanted to lose necessarily, but we kind of had the problem of being able to register our new players and needing a certain amount, obviously, to be English or at least homegrown in nation. So Lucas Paqueta gone over to Hertha Berlin for £31 million. Which again, I think is a good amount of money, if I'm honest. So now we need to have a look at who we brought in. First of all, we needed some sort of a rotation striker. So Patson Daka has joined the club. He cost us £60 million. Those of you who've watched the channel before will remember him in the Journeyman. I think he played for Mönchengladbach when we were at Hertha Berlin, and he scored basically a hat-trick every time he played against us. I don't think this version of Patson Daka is quite as good, but £16 million, because he was on the transfer list, I felt was quite a good deal for a rotation striker. He's followed up by Joaquim Carrera, who can play over on the left or the right, or he can cover as a striker as well. He arrives at West Ham from Inter Milan for £9 million. He was very, very quickly followed by Wijndal, a player obviously can play as left back. He's come over from Ajax for £28 million. I think he's an improvement on players that we did have there, if I'm honest. Obviously, we had Cresswell there last season. He's left the club, so we needed someone on that left-hand side. I think he's very, very capable. At only 23 years old as well, he has got room to improve. And obviously, I then mentioned we were talking about having players homegrown in nation, and Eric Garcia comes over from Barcelona. Having been at Manchester City, he classes as homegrown in nation. It cost us 28.5 million. Some of these are quite expensive deals in order to fulfill that criteria we need to register our players. We then signed another centre-back in the form of Arthur Tete. I think, if I remember, he is classed as a wonder kid in FM, but don't quote me on that. He's come over from Rennes for 31.5 million. He's had a pretty good start to life in the Premier League as well. And again, he's got a decent amount of room to grow. I imagine he'll be partnering Zuma for most of this season. And because we lost Darren Randolph and we only had 2 goalkeepers, we decided to upgrade again and bring in Kakir over to West Ham for £17.5 million from Trabzonspor. I cannot say their name. I never can when I see them. But again, I think he's a bit of an upgrade. Obviously, last season we could afford Lafont, so we brought him in. I think this guy is a little bit of an upgrade again. 3 appearances so far and only 2 conceded in the league with 2 clean sheets is a really good start. Weston McKennie followed him to the club as well, joining from Juventus for £14.5 million. I don't expect him to necessarily be a nailed-on starter, but he's definitely a very, very capable come off the bench sort of player in that ball-winning midfielder role. It's obviously either filled by Declan Rice or Souček. So Weston McKenzie joining the club. And then another one that just kind of filled that homegrown in nation little slot. And we had to buy at least one more. And we needed a really, really good striker, I felt. Obviously, we brought in Daka. Skamaka was really good last season. But Dominic Calvert-Lewin, he's cost us £67 million. What's mad about that is that actually wasn't the high end of, you get that bracket of we are going to pay something, you're going to be between this and this. This wasn't the high end. £67 million for Calvert-Lewin. He's scored 2 in 3 so far for us at the club though, so hopefully he just continues doing that. We then brought in Cancelleri, Italian either left or right winger, can cover as a striker as well from Lazio for £16 million. Again, I don't actually expect him to be a recognised starter yet. I think, obviously, Jared Bowen over on this side is probably the recognised starter, but lots of potential, and we're trying to build for the future. And then we needed a right back because we've got Ben Johnson, but don't think he's necessarily the Premier League quality we're looking for yet. So, Timber coming in from Ajax. We stole both their left back and their right back. He cost us £60 million to bring to the club. He is only 22. He could be here for years to come yet. That could still turn out to be a really, really good deal. And then just at the end of the transfer window, Alex Scott. Every time I do a rebuild, he comes up on my scouting reports as being a very good player for the future. 4-star potential. We've brought him in. He was transfer listed at Bristol City because he wanted to join a bigger club. So he's come over 8.5 million. We've loaned him back to Bristol City for the season. If we pick our starting 11 then without any sort of restriction, this is what it looks like. We've got Kakir in goal, Winjao, Tiete, Zuma and Timber as our back four, Neves, Souček and Rice in midfield with Vlasic over on the left, Bowen on the right and Calvert-Lewin up front. I think that's an improvement on last season's team, and hopefully that's an improvement on where we finish this season. And with that in mind, let's simulate through our second season with West Ham and see where we finish. Season 2 over, how did we do? Starting with the Cups then and the Carabao Cup, we've beaten Hull in the 3rd round, but then we've crashed out to Liverpool on penalties in the 4th round. Goal there by Jared Bowen, but that was after Canasse's very early 6-minute goal. And unfortunately, we do lose out on penalties with both Souček and Reece Nelson missing their penalties. FA Cup-wise, it's not that. Oh God, that's a bad result. 5-0 against Forest Green. Utterly battered by Manchester United though. 4-1. Declan Rice getting sent off in the 84th minute as well with a straight red card. Lots of yellows in there. Not very good performances overall. We're not doing well here in the cup competitions. Champions League then. Let's have a look at that. We did, I think, did we end up finishing top? Potentially we did. So we had us, Borussia Dortmund, PSV and Dinamo Zagreb in here. We won all 6 of our games, as we can see. So we have a quick look at the schedule for this one. It's a 6-0 win to start us off in the Champions League campaign against Zagreb. 1-0 against PSV and 1-0 against Borussia Dortmund in the first half of the competition. We then beat Borussia Dortmund 4-0 away over in Germany. Jared Bowen, Souček, Calvert-Lewin and Declan Rice, the scorers on that day. Another 1-0 win against PSV and a 4-0 win against Dinamo Zagreb, meaning we did not concede once at all in the group stage. That changed very quickly though against Barcelona, who are opponents in the first knockout round. 3-0 away in the first leg. We do win 2-0 in the second leg at home, but obviously that is not enough to see us through into the next round. And also Barcelona, that must mean, we have a look at them, they must have finished second in their group, surely. So they actually finished second behind Liverpool. Of course it was Liverpool. The only thing left to look at then is the Premier League. We did start off well with 2-0 wins against Forest and Manchester City before drawing 2-2 with Arsenal and then managing to lose to Wolves. So a very mixed bag of results there. We got on a really good run here by the looks of it. There's a 5-2 win against Huddersfield there. A 4-2 win against Fulham. We don't lose again until mid-December against Everton, and then we lose against Manchester United at the end of December. January, that is normally a bit of a dodgy one, I always find, in rebuilds. Really good. In fact, we go through the entirety of January without conceding one single goal. In fact, have a look at this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games on the trot without conceding a goal in the league. And that's where we face the likes of United, the likes of Manchester City, Spurs. That's a really good run. But then we end all of that with a loss to Aston Villa, which is followed up with a loss to Leeds. A 4-0 win against Everton looks like a bit of a rebound before we then lose to Leicester. We've managed to beat Liverpool 3-2, but then we lose to Spurs. So it's a little bit all over the place, and 3 draws at the end of the season as well. I mean, we finish in 3rd place on 73 points, behind Manchester United and Liverpool. We are ahead though of Manchester City, who are in 4th place, and it means currently we are the top team in London, with Spurs, Chelsea, Arsenal, all those clubs finishing below us. Arsenal not even getting any European football. That's not great for them, is it? If we have a quick look at the squad bits, then top goal scorer this season was a new signing, Calvert-Lewin, 23 goals in 42 appearances. He's followed by Jared Bowen and Vlasic. So our front 3 are scoring a nice amount of goals by the looks of it. Scamacca there managing 9 this season in the very few appearances he had as well. Ruben Neves, I said we should have been playing that man last season. He is our top assist maker this season with 13. He's also wanted by a number of clubs, including Juventus and Barcelona. Jared Bowen is our second top assist-making player. I guess that's how you say that, with 11, followed by Calvert-Lewin, who is also, of course, our top goal scorer. For having a look at ability, it means Zuma is still our top player, followed by Declan Rice. Weston McKennie, that's interesting to see him creeping in there. And actually, he's played a lot of games this season. Interesting. Kakia, who is wanted by Newcastle, Neves, Timber. We've got a decent team here. Right down the bottom though, we have got the likes of Emerson, who now 2-star. Actually, you can't see that. Let's inverse that for you. Emerson with 2-star current ability and 2-star potential. Probably time for him to move on. Reece Nelson as well hasn't progressed as much as we would like him. And Patson Daka, we signed him. I knew he'd be a bit of a rotation player. He's only made 1 appearance. He did score in that 1 appearance though, so it's not a complete failure. And looking ahead to next season, we have got a £60 million transfer budget to sign some players. Again, if we have a quick look, it's showing Scamacca as our best striker, which is interesting. I'd still say it's Calvert-Lewin, at least on star rating. But what do I know? I'm not the man choosing the team. That's down to the assistant manager. In goal, we've only got Kakia, but I don't necessarily think he needs an upgrade. Defensively, we've seen we can go games without conceding many goals as well. So I think this season, it's just a case of who's the best player who will join us? So we're back after our Season 3 summer transfer window, and let's have a look at what we've been doing. In terms of transfers out then, we have received £130 million. The major ones, we've had Areola. He's left, gone over and joined Monaco in France for £29.5 million. He hasn't actually played a game since we started this rebuild, so £29.5 million. I feel like that's a pretty good deal for us. Other players leaving then. Ruben Vezo has left the club. We did obviously purchase him within this rebuild. He played a lot of games the first season, but not as many last season, and we got a little bit of money for him. He's actually gone to Monaco as well for 7.75 million. Another one who we recently purchased is Patson Daka, and he never played a game for the club, so that is definitely a mistake on my part. £16 million spent on him, only 9.75 million received. And then we had the big one, which is Declan Rice, who's gone over to PSG. It's one of those where they came in, made a bid for, let's say, I think it was about 43 million, and we've gone, yeah, you can leave if they bid 73 million, and they've gone, yeah, all right, we'll take that. We will bid 73 million pound for him. So Declan Rice, unfortunately, has left West Ham, which is a bit of a knock, if nothing else, because he is quite a good player, and equally, he's homegrown. So that leaves us with a little bit of a gap. Reece Nelson, obviously not as big. Reece Nelson has also left, as has Emerson for the club. But we have reinvested all of that money. The first player we've bought in is Ward-Prowse. Now, I know what you're thinking. Not necessarily the marquee replacement you want for Declan Rice. But hear me out. He is legitimately one of my favourite players, if not my favourite player on FM22. 24.5 million he's cost to bring him to West Ham. Now, he fulfills the role of an English player in the squad, which we did need. And more than anything, and the reason I love him is it's a bit of a cheat code. I had him in my Arsenal beta save. I've had him in other saves as well. And he is a cheat code on set pieces. 20 corners, 18 crossing, and 20 for free kick taking. The man is going to get us assists. The man will get us goals this season. We've also brought in another player I believe I actually used in the Arsenal beta save for FM22, which is Sebastian Coates. He's come in for 8.5 million. He's a fantastic centre-back with brilliant heading, brilliant marking, and hopefully someone who can pair really nicely with Zuma and stop us conceding goals. We did that all right last season. He's going to add to that. Another player coming in for us that has cost us an absolute truckload of cash is Harvey Barnes. We are paying here the English player tax. One, he's come from the Premier League, which makes him more expensive, and two, he's English, which makes him doubly more expensive. £56 million to bring in Harvey Barnes. But I do think he becomes our best left midfielder or left winger. So money well spent. I'll let you guys decide. Let me know in the comments down below. We've also brought in another English player in the form of Tariq Lamptey. Obviously, previously of Chelsea, currently at Brighton. We have brought him across to the club for £30 million. He's probably not dethroning Timber over on that right-hand side yet, but he is there for the future. As is Junior, a goalkeeper we have purchased for the club. He's cost us 6.25 million arriving from Brazil, as we can see. But more importantly, he's got really good potential. So he's a bit of a player for the future rather than now in this rebuild. Much the same with Luca Romero, Argentinian right winger, central attacking midfielder. Again, it's not going to play now, but it'd be really, really good for the future. One that is going to play now, I believe, and we have brought in as well, is Goncalo Ramos. And if you have a look at him, we played him as a pressing forward or an advanced forward, which is two roles we're likely to play. He's got great dribbling. He's got great finishing. He's got slightly more mediocre first touch. I'll allow that. But he is a model citizen as well. And if you look at how he played for Benfica last season, 27 goals in 31 appearances and 22 the season before that is really not a bad return for the player. What is happening though is for some reason my management team didn't book much of a pre-season. So we only had 2 friendlies against Monaco and Olympiacos, and we've gone straight into the Premier League, losing to Aston Villa. We then drew to Newcastle, battered West Brom. I'm not even sure if that one was in the league. It was in the league. And then we've drawn with Fulham. So not the best start we've ever had, but we're going to have to simulate through the rest of Season 3 and see how we get on. So we finished our third season in charge of West Ham, and for the first time in this rebuild, we've missed out on the Champions League. Not quite what we're looking for this season. I mean, you can see here, looking at the competitions, we got knocked out in the third round of the Carabao Cup, knocked out in the fifth round of the FA Cup, and the first knockout round of the Champions League. And in the Premier League, we are nowhere near that title, which is really disappointing. If we just have a look at our results throughout the season in the Premier League, we can see it didn't start that well with a 3-2 loss to Aston Villa that we mentioned, but we have got back on track pretty quickly. It's a 5-0 win against Leeds, but then we've lost against Everton. This is where we were getting damaged. We obviously need to be beating the top teams like your Manchester Cities, and a 4-1 loss to Manchester City there at the end of November just isn't good enough if we're going to win the Champions League. We didn't the Champions League, the Premier League. We then did go a long way without a loss, so we went through the whole of December with only dropping 2 points in that. But then we've lost to Liverpool in January, we lost to Spurs, we've lost to Manchester City again, and Fulham, and then we've lost to Everton and Leeds the last 2 games of the season, which has meant we've dropped down into 5th. And not only have we not won the Premier League or any trophy, but also we're not going to have a Champions League football next season. In terms of the squad, if you have a look on here, there are some decent performances. Dominic Calvert-Lewin seems to have dropped down in ability and potential, but he did still bang in 20 goals last season, followed by Weston McKenzie, actually got 13, our second highest goal scorer, and then Matteo Cancelleri, which is not a player I thought would be playing that many games, let alone being our third highest top scorer. If we have a look at assists, unsurprisingly, the top assist maker there is Ward-Prowse, followed by Jared Bowen, Harvey Barnes, and Ruben Neves. But I think one of the most striking differences is if you have a look at our goalkeeper and the amount he conceded in the league. He played exactly the same amount of games. We only conceded 26 last season and 43 this season. And that is obviously going to make the difference between getting battered against Manchester City and only losing a little bit. Finances for the season coming up then, which is going to be the last season we do, at least for now, was £74 million. You can see there's only £47 million left in that transfer budget. And that's because we've already agreed a deal for Theo Hernandez coming over from AC Milan to play as our left back. I think he is an improvement on what we've got already. He has cost us, if I remember, quite a bit of money. We can't actually see exactly how much we're paying for him yet, but we'll have a look at that when we can. But obviously ability and potential wise, very, very good. He's got really good crossing, which is something I want to get into that big head of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. If he's playing up front, his dribbling is good, as is his first touch. I think he is definitely an improvement on what we have. And if we have a look at our squad depth and where we need to potentially bring in more players, I think left back was one of them, because it's one of the positions where we've only got a 3-star player. Potentially goalkeeper again, but I won't be mad if we don't. We've got 2 4-star defenders at centre back, so I'm not worried about that. In midfield, if we could find someone that's an elite midfielder, then maybe. And the same thing goes for our left and right wings. And maybe we need to bring in a striker, possibly. I'm not really sure. Obviously, we did bring in Goncalo Ramos from Benfica. £40 million. He played 21 games and got 4 goals. He hasn't had much of a run in the team, to be honest, because of Calvert-Lewin. So I'm not sure exactly if this is his fault he's not scoring or our fault he's not scoring. It's very difficult to judge when obviously your assistant manager is the man choosing the teams. But for now, we're going to go away. We're going to try and do some transfers, and then we're going to come back for season 4, where hopefully we can at least win a trophy for West Ham. Well, all in all, heading into season 4, it's been a pretty quiet transfer window for West Ham. We've had a few deals, but nothing major. You can see we've had lots of players being bid on. Arthur Tiete, Eric Garcia, and Sebastian Coates all been subject to bids in the last few weeks. But the only player I think has actually left is Correria, who obviously came over to us during this rebuild for £9 million, and we've let him go for 10.5 to go over to Germany and Bayer Leverkusen. He really didn't play a lot of matches last season, and we have brought in a player that I think is an improvement. Obviously, Correria brought in to either play on the left or right hand side. We've brought in someone I think fits us a little bit better this season. And that is young English player Saka. Of course, at Arsenal at the moment, we can see his value is very, very high. He's now the highest value player at West Ham United, and we've paid £77 million to bring him to the club. Again, I'm very, very aware that that is essentially paying both the fact that we are buying him from a rival, the fact that he is English, and the fact that he's in the Premier League, pushing his price sky high. But I think in the long term, it's kind of worth it. He plays perfectly as an inverted winger on this side, which is what we wanted. And he can cover it as a winger on the other side or as an inverted winger. He can actually do both. And the fact that he's English as well, he's going to help count towards that home grow coefficient we need in the Europa League, in the Champions League, and those sorts of competitions. He is one of only 2 purchases. The other one we obviously already saw, but now we can check how much we actually paid for him, and it was £56 million, and that is Theo Hernandez. You can see here now he is at the club. We can see everything a little bit better. And he is a very, very good player. At the moment, he is injured, but he's starting off to life in the Premier League with a 7.4 rating, and we can't really knock that. Looking at our pre-season and our first matches in the Premier League, we've done well. Obviously, playing against some smaller teams up here, 2 11-0 victories there. We drew 1-1 with Bayer Leverkusen. We won 5-0 against Club Brugge there, and we drew against Real Madrid before beating Atalanta. But against Nottingham Forest on the opening day of the season, we've drawn against Chelsea and Manchester City. And why that it doesn't necessarily look like a positive, if you think back to last season where we were losing by 3 or 4 goals to Manchester City, getting a 0-0 draw that we actually looked fairly comfortable in is a big positive, I think. And if you have a look at this, yeah, we weren't in control of the game, but we weren't getting battered either. For the season ahead, there's only 2 positions I have asked our assistant manager to make sure these players are included in every available match, and that is Ward-Prowse as a box-to-box midfielder, because technically while he isn't the best player we've got, the fact that he is fantastic at set pieces, he will get us assists, and obviously that results in goals this season, so I definitely think he needs to be in there. And Saka, I think, is slightly better than Jared Bowen, so we're asking for him to be included on that right-hand side. We also made him a promise when he got to the club that he'd be playing as an inverted winger on the right hand side, so we're just trying to fulfill that promise. But if we just pick this without restriction, this is what the assistant manager is saying is our best team. So it is Kakir in goal, Hernandez, Zuma, Coates and Timber as our back 4, Neves, Souček and McKennie in midfield, with Barnes, Saka and Calvert-Lewin our front 3. Obviously, as I mentioned, Souček not necessarily going to be the player in there. I think that is going to be Ward-Prowse this season. But let's simulate forward through our last season with West Ham and see if that tactical decision pays off or not. So we are at the end of our 4th season with West Ham, and did we win any trophies? No, we did not. You can see here we were knocked out in the Carabao Cup and in the FA Cup, but we did have quite a lengthy run in the Europa League this season, which we're going to have a quick look at now. You can see we ended up in a group with Porto, Twente and Ferencváros. That's definitely not how you pronounce that, but we did finish at top of that group, drawing 1 game, which was against FC Twente, but winning all 5 of the other ones, meaning we finished first, a full 7 points ahead of Porto as well. We then continue on in the competition throughout the month of March, facing Strasbourg first, a match we win 6-1 across the 2 legs, before moving on to Roma, another match we win 5-1 across the 2 legs, but then we face Lazio in the semi-final, and it proves that the Italian giants are 1 step too far for us this season. And if we have a look at the Premier League table, we did finish outside the top 4 again. But unlike previous seasons, it doesn't look like we're losing a lot of games, rather we're drawing them. In fact, we lost 6 games. Eventual champions Liverpool only lost 6 as well, as did Man United. We actually lost less games than Manchester City this season, but 13 draws to our name means we don't get into that top 4 again. And just looking at the start of the season, we can see there were 3 draws in the first 5 games. Throughout the month of October, further 2 draws against Sheffield United and against Everton. They are very much more frequent than previous seasons. We've got a nice end to the season here with 3 1-0 wins on the trot against Leeds, Brentford and Manchester City, but it's just not quite enough to get us into that top 4. If we look at goals this season, I actually changed something after we had a look at our tactic, which was to put Matteo Cancelleri up front, because I had noticed that he was scoring lots and lots of goals. He scored 16 in the league by the end of the season. We have a look at all competitions: 32 goals in 40 starting appearances and 11 as a substitute is a really good return for him. Our next highest scorer is new signing Saka, followed by Vlasic, Ward-Prowse, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, all the way down here with only 4 goals to his name this season. In terms of assists, Ward-Prowse is once again top, but that 11 assists there in 50 appearances is a lot lower than last season. Saka, it looks like he's had a brilliant season. 53 appearances for him, 12 goals and 10 assists. So a really good debut season for him. And at the end of our 4-season rebuild, this is what our best 11 looks like. It's not changed a lot since the start of the season. Zuma, Coyotes in the central of defence. Lamperty now over on the right and Hernandez on the left. Neves, McKennie and Ward-Prowse in midfield behind Barnes, Saka and Cancelleri. So there's definitely some sort of team there that you can build on. If you do want to play with this team yourself and continue, and maybe you can be the manager to get West Ham to win a trophy. Any trophy will do at this point. Then you can become a member of the YouTube channel. The link is down in the top of my description. And by becoming a member, there are certain tiers that allow you to request access to save files and gives you other perks as well, like a badge next to your name, and there are as well for the higher tiers going to be some exclusive videos and series for paying members, so it is worth going and have a look at that, especially before we launch FM23. For now though, let me know down in the comments how you think this rebuild went. Could you have done better? What should we have done better? And until next time, of course, please do drop a like on the video, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you over on the next one. Bye bye.